understand you got the money. Okay.
I got a few, Bob, yeah.
Okay. You support Trump? You do?
Yep.
Okay.
I was one of the first endorsers, public endorsers of President Trump.
What are you guys going to do when our ocean level rises?
Thank you for asking that question. I have the answer.
Don't let me finish.
I have the answer.
Let me finish.
Well, thank you for the question. Yeah. Okay.
For the first time on Earth, we're changing the gas.
Now you're full of shit. Sit down. I'm going to answer you. I'm going to answer. Just shut up and sit down.
No way.
Sit down.
No. I got to finish my question.
I'm going to answer global warming.
All right, finish the question, then answer.
It's changing on Earth, and it's changing to CO2. What do you people with the money, what are you doing about this? Because
I'm going to tell you right now.
No, I've got children. I've got 21, 23-year-old children. And what's their future with you people with money? You talk about money all of the time.
Okay. Sit down, please. Sit down, please. In the front row. Excuse me. In the front row. Please sit down. Okay, you've asked your question. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna answer.
Excuse me, ma'am. Will you please sit down?
And
please.
Thank you.
That's okay. Please sit down. Let him answer.
Okay. In 2011, my wife and I were in Antarctica, renewing our vows. For most of you that don't know, Antarctica's on a mountaintop. Okay, and there is a $500 million facility, scientific facility there, and the scientists came to give us presentations about global warming. And they had cores of ice that they had drilled. They had drilled 4,000 or 5,000 cores, and they only brought 15 or 20. So they're going through the second or third core, and they said 275,000 years ago, this was the temperature, blah, 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 blah. And then 55,000 years ago, the world was 2 degrees warmer Celsius than it is today. This is 2011. And, stop. And he said, and I said, well, you mean the whole world? He says, yes. And the poles are only benchmarks. And I said, well, what about the things that the young woman alluded to? Okay. And he said, it's all cyclical. And although the gas may have exacerbated it, in the cosmos of time, it's not a fart in the wind. In the cosmos of time, of the 13.8 billion years that we've been on this miserable planet, it's not a fart in the wind. And as I told Joe Rogan on his show, and he said in his infinite wisdom, and Joe, if you hear this, I thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. He said, then in 25,000 years, it's most likely not going to be a problem. Now, my direct answer to your question, if that were really true, which you believe, and let's just for a moment say that it is true. That means that the best scenario vis-a-vis global warming is about 10 feet raise in water. That's the best scenario over the next 40, 50 years. That's the best scenario. The worst scenario is about 100 feet. But let's just take the 10 feet. If the water on the planet is going to rise up 10 feet, that means the southern part of the United States is gone. England is gone. Most of Europe is gone. And I can go, most of Central America is gone. Okay. If that's the case, let's just take Florida, for example, which is one of the fastest growing beachfront condominiums on the planet. In the prospectus, when you invest, there should be, in the footnotes, if global warming is for real, they won't put it that way, global warming happens and water rises 10 feet, this investment you made is fuck all. Not one single investment prospectus written since 2000, this century, has alluded to global warming. Not one motherfucker. If it were really true, the banks wouldn't invest. The banks wouldn't finance. Not one motherfucking condominium. So the people that have the money, and I'm jealous of the Vice President, Gore, which Sally and I rode on a plane from South America with a few years ago. I am jealous he came up with a scam before I did. Because the financial institutions, the banks, of this world know it's not going to happen. Otherwise, you couldn't get a goddamn loan in London. You know those 30, 40-year mortgages? The world will be over by then. Is Barclays Bank going to give you a motherfucking loan? With the greatest respect, ma'am, it's the greatest fraud that's been perpetrated on mankind this century.
I want to make it darn clear, Mr. Kenny's not a scientist. I am. He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now, hold on just a minute. I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder, though, is when you see...
because you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN. But I'm happy that I got on the air and got a chance to talk to your viewers. Hello, everybody. There is no global warming.
What I do wonder is when you see the government, when you see NASA, when you see other institutions say that 97% of climate scientists agree, do you think they're making it up? What I don't understand is how you square that.
Well, that's a manipulated figure, and let me explain it to you. The government puts out about $2.5 billion directly for climate research every year. It only gives that money to scientists who will produce scientific results that support the global warming hypothesis of the Democrat Party position. So they don't have any choice. If you're going to get the money, you got to support their position. Therefore, 97% of the scientific reports published support global warming. Why? Because those are the ones the government pays for, and that's where the money is. It's real simple, but that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't make it true.
Το διοξείδιο του άνθρακος δεν έχει καμία σημασία με την αύξηση της θερμοκρασίας. Ουδέμια. Ποτέ. Το διοξείδιο του άνθρακος αντιδράει με το νερό και δημιουργεί οργανικές ενώσεις. Είναι ευτυχία να υπάρχει διοξείδιο του άνθρακος. Είναι δυστυχία να ακούμε τις αρλούμπες, οι οποίες πηγαίνουν εις βάρος του λαού. Και δυστυχώς αυτή τη στιγμή τα Ηνωμένα Έθνη ακούνε διοξείδιο του άνθρακος, οι Ευρωπαίοι διοξείδιο του άνθρακος και τρέχουν όλοι από το διοξείδιο του άνθρακος. Επιστημονικά, τα τελευταία 50 χρόνια ανέβηκε η περιεκτικότητα του διοξειδίου του άνθρακος στην ατμόσφαιρα κατά 0,005%. Είναι δυνατόν αυτό το πράγμα να επηρεάζει την αλλαγή του κλίματος? Πρέπει να είσαι τελείως τρελός. Για να δεις.
The right to control CO2 by declaring it a pollutant.
Yes.
Think about that for a moment. Here is a pollutant. Let's say some genius comes up with a method. He's going to get rid of a little bit more than 60% of the CO2. And what will be the wonderful consequence of that? The death of all animals, because the plants have died, there's no food.
Yeah.
What kind of pollutant is it? You get rid of it and you die.
That's a great point.
Prior to 2009, I felt that supporting the IPCC consensus on climate change was a responsible thing to do. I bought into the argument, don't trust what one scientist says, trust what an international team of 1,000 scientists has said after years of careful deliberation. That all changed for me in November 2009 following the leaked ClimateGate emails that illustrated the sausage making and even bullying that went into building the consensus. I started speaking out, saying that scientists needed to do better at making the data and supporting information publicly available, being more transparent about how they reach conclusions, doing a better job of assessing uncertainties, and actively engaging with scientists having minority perspectives. The response of my colleagues to this is summed up by the title of a 2010 article in the Scientific American. Climate heretic Judith Curry turns on her colleagues. I came to the growing realization that I had fallen into the trap of groupthink. I had accepted the consensus based on second-order evidence, the assertion that a consensus existed.
There is no scientific proof that human emissions of carbon dioxide are the dominant cause of the minor warming of the Earth's atmosphere over the past 100 years. If there were such a proof, it would be written down for all to see. No actual proof, as it is understood in science, exists. Please see Exhibit 1. The IPCC states, quote, "It is extremely likely that human influence has been the dominant cause of the observed warming since the mid-20th century. Extremely likely is not a scientific term, but rather a judgment as in a court of law. The IPCC defines extremely likely as a 95 to 100% probability. Those numbers are not the result of any mathematical calculation or statistical analysis. They have been invented to express the expert judgment as determined by the IPCC. As noted by many observers, including Dr. Freeman Dyson of the Princeton Institute for Advanced Studies, a computer model is not a crystal ball. We may think it sophisticated, but we cannot predict the future with a computer model any more than we can make predictions with crystal balls, throwing bones, or by appealing to the gods. When modern life evolved over 500
people don't think they don't always tell you the truth. You know, there is nothing in their contract, in fact, that makes it to their advantage always to tell you the truth. So, and these are the people I'm talking about are people that, like, they say they're a member of the committee called, say, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they have these big meetings where they try to figure out how are we going to continually prove that the planet is getting warmer when that's actually contrary to most people's sensations. I mean, if you actually measure the temperature over a period, I mean, the temperature has been measured now pretty carefully for about 50, 60 years. Longer than that it's been measured, but in really nice, precise ways, and records have been kept for 50 or 60 years. And in fact, the temperature hadn't really gone up. It's like the average temperature has gone up a tiny little bit because the nighttime temperatures at the weather stations have come up just a little bit. But there's a good explanation for that, and that's that the weather stations are all built outside of town where the airport was, and now the town's moved out there, there's concrete all around, and they call it the skyline effect. And most responsible people that measure temperatures realize you have to shield your measuring device from that, and even then, you know, because the buildings get warm in the daytime and they keep it a little warmer at night. So the temperature has been sort of inching up. It should have been, but not a lot. Not like, you know, the first guy that got the idea that we were going to fry ourselves here, actually, he didn't think of it that way. His name was Svante Arrhenius. He was Swedish, and he said if you double the CO2 level in the atmosphere, which he thought, this is 1900, the temperature ought to go up about 5.5 degrees, he calculated. He was thinking of the Earth as kind of like, you know, like a completely ice-insulated thing with no stuff in it, really, just energy coming down, energy leaving. And so he came up with this theory, and he said, this will be cool because it'll be a longer growing season in Sweden, you know, and the surfers liked it. The surfers thought that's a cool idea because it's pretty cold in the ocean sometimes. But a lot of other people later on started thinking it would be bad, you know, but nobody actually demonstrated it. Right? I mean, the temperature as measured, and you can find this, you know, but nobody actually demonstrated it. Right? I mean, the temperature as measured, you can find this on our wonderful internet. You just go and look for all the NASA's records and all the Weather Bureau's records, and look at it yourself, and you'll see the temperature has the nighttime temperature measured on the surface of the planet has gone up a tiny little bit. So if you just average that in the daytime temperature, it looks like it went up about 0.7 degrees in the century, but in fact it was just coming up, it was the nighttime. The daytime temperatures didn't go up. So, and Arrhenius's theory and all the global warmers, they would say, yeah, it should go up in the daytime too, if it's the greenhouse effect. Now, people like things that have like names like that, they can envision it, right? I mean, but people don't like things like this. Like you don't get all excited about things like the actual evidence, which would be evidence for strengthening of the tropical circulation in the 1990s. It's a paper that came out in February. Most of you probably hadn't heard about it. Evidence for large decadal variability in the tropical mean radiative energy budget. Excuse me. Those papers were published by NASA and some scientists at Columbia and Veliky and a whole bunch of people, Princeton. And those two papers came out in Science magazine February the 1st. And the conclusion in both of these papers, and then also the Science editors' description of these papers for the quickie, is that our theories about global warming are completely wrong. I mean, what these guys were doing, and it's what this NASA people have been saying this for a long time. They say if you measure the temperature of the atmosphere, it isn't going up. It's not going up at all. We've been doing it very carefully now for 20 years from satellites, and it isn't going up. And in this paper, they showed something much more striking, and that was that they did what they call a radiation. I'm not going to go into the details of it, actually. It's quite complicated, but it isn't as complicated as they might make you think it is by the words they use in those papers. If you really get down to it, they say, the sun puts out a certain amount of energy. We know how much that is. It falls on the Earth gives back a certain amount. When it gets warm, it makes redder energy, like infrared, like something that's warm gives off infrared. The whole business of the global warming trash really is that if there's too much CO2 in the atmosphere, the heat that's trying to escape won't be able to get out. But the heat coming from the sun, which is mostly down it's like 350 nanometers is where it's centered, that goes right through CO2. So you still get heated, but you don't dissipate any. Well, these guys measured all those things. I mean, you can talk about that stuff, and you can write these large reports, and you can get government money to do it. But they actually measured it, and it turns out that in the last 10 years, that's why they say decadal there, that the energy, the level of what they call imbalance has been way the hell over what was expected. Like the amount of imbalance, meaning heat's coming in and is not going out, that you would get from having double the CO2, which we're not anywhere near that, by the way. But if we did in 2025 or something have double the CO2 as we had in 1900, they say it would increase the energy budget by about, in other words, 1 watt per square centimeter more would be coming in than going out. So the planet should get warmer. Well, they found out in this study, these two studies by two different teams, that 5.5 watts per square meter have been coming in from 1998, 1999, and the place didn't get warmer. So the theory's complete. These papers should have been called the end to the global warming fiasco, But they're concerned, and you can tell they have very guarded conclusions in these papers because they're talking about big laboratories that are funded by lots of money and by scared people. If they said, you know what, there isn't a problem with global warming any longer, so we can, they're funding. If you start a grant request with something like that, you say, global warming obviously hadn't happened. If they actually said that, I'm getting out. I'll stand up too, and I'll slowly get that. They have to say that. They have to be very cautious, but what I'm saying is you can be delighted because the editor of Science, who is no dummy, and both of these fairly professional teams have come to the same conclusion, and in the bottom of the lines in their papers they have to say what this means is that what we've been thinking was the global circulation model that would predict that the Earth is going to get overheated and stuff, that it's all wrong. It's wrong by a large factor. It's not by a small one. They just misinterpreted the fact that the Earth, there's obviously some mechanisms going on that nobody knew about. because the heat's coming in and it isn't getting warmer. So the planet is a pretty amazing thing. You know, it's big and horrible and big and wonderful, and it does all kinds of things we don't know anything about. So, I mean, the reason I put those things all together, I was thinking, here's the way you're supposed to do science. Some science is done for other reasons than just curiosity. And there's a lot of things like global warming and ozone hole and, you know, a whole bunch of scientific public issues that if you're interested in them, you have to get down to the details and read the papers called Large Decadal Variability in the Tropics. You have to figure out what all those words mean. And if you just listen to the guys who are hyping those issues and making a lot of money out of it, you'll be misinformed and you'll be worrying about the wrong things. Remember the 10 things that are going to get you. The one of them, and the asteroids is the one I really agree with there. I mean, you got to watch out for asteroids. Okay, thank you for having me here.
Order will be restored.
7 years ago, the world ended. Now the train is all that's left. First, the weather changed. In the final days of the freeze, the rich retreated to an ark. This is Snowpiercer. This is how we survive. There are those who have and those who suffer.
What do you see when you look at this train?
I see a fortress to class.
Developing through technology an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
We cannot hide away from human population growth because, you know, it underlies so many of the other problems. All these things we talk about wouldn't be a problem if there was the size of population that there was 500 years ago.
This is Richard Werner, the top academic scholar in the world on central banking. He wrote the book and did the documentary, The Princes of the Yen, about the Japanese central bank. Here he is in Malmo, Sweden, in May.
The nature of this CBDC, what is it actually going to look like? They never talk about that. Right. But I heard one European central banker tell me what it's going to look like. He saw it. He was invited to one of the old central banks in Europe that are very much promoting this. And they showed him. And, you know, he's a top, executive director of another central bank in Europe, and there's no reason to believe that he was telling me a story. And he was around this large and would be implanted under your skin.
A British company has an idea that would let you ditch your wallet or purse and still be able to pay for things. The company Wallet More says the $300 chip is the size of a grain of rice. You'd most likely have it implanted in your hand, and once it's activated, you can use it at a checkout by just swiping your hand over the card reader.
FTX blew up in spectacular fashion. It looks like fraud. But in the wake of that, rather than thinking through, like, why did regulators let this happen, there's a new effort underway to regulate every single financial transaction that occurs in this country through something called the Central Bank Digital Currency, CBDC. If that happens, we're done.
So you might have missed what happened Wednesday afternoon at the Fed, but they started their CBDC. Maybe we should start having the conversation of, gosh, this looks like the mark of the beast.
COVID makes it accelerates the process of digitalization and automatization. It legitimizes the deployment of mass surveillance, even in democratic countries, and it makes surveillance go under your skin.
Özür dilerim. Güvenliği çağırdım. Ah, Tanrım. Hayır, lütfen bunu yapmayın. Ben 5 yıldız gönderdim. 5 yıldız.
Sorun nedir Helen?
Tehdit ve küfürlü konuşma. Hayır, tehdit etmiyordum.
Konuşmayın
Ben
bayan.
sadece kendisini...
Bayan. Pekala. Evet. Huzuru tekrar sağlamak için havaalanı güvenliği olarak yetkimi kullanarak cezalandırıcı tedbir amacıyla sizi tam 1 puan aşağı indiriyorum. Bu geçicidir.
Hayır.
Puanınız 24 saat içinde normale dönecek.
Hayır, ona şimdi
Bu
ihtiyacım var.
geçici sürede alacağınız tüm düşük puanlar 2 katıyla yansıyacaktır.
2 katı mı?
Bu sürede olumsuz görüş almamanızı öneririz.
So with the vaccine passports, none of that will be the case. Everyone has to be participating all the time. And what I mean by that is if you don't participate, you don't get let into the supermarket to buy food. You don't get let into the pub to meet your friends. You can't get into the restaurant. You can't travel on an airplane. You can't travel on a bus. You can't travel on a train. And it's not just that you're forced to participate. I can't say this any more clearly. The vaccine passport platform is the same platform as a social credit system. I'm going to say that again because it's so important. The vaccine passport platform is the same platform as a social credit system, like in China, that enslaves 8 billion people. In China, the CCP can find any dissident in 5 minutes because of the 360-degree surveillance of the social credit system. And it means that when you act like a good citizen, you get a boost, and when you act like a bad citizen, opportunities get closed to you. Maybe your child doesn't get into college or get into prep school, maybe, you don't get that job, you don't get that promotion. The vaccine passport that is being proposed in the rest of the West is the same platform. I can't say that enough. It's being rolled out in Israel. It was rolled out in Israel. It's being promoted in Britain that you have to scan your vaccine passport in order to go to a pub and have a pint. President Biden in America said this is going to be mandated. My tyrannical Governor Andrew Cuomo, said that it's got to be, rolled out. The Excelsior Pass that IBM is creating. It's happening at warp speed. So please don't be fooled. This is the most dangerous tool that humanity has faced in my lifetime, if not ever, in terms of human.
And on Friday at the G7, we will decide effectively who lives and who dies.